Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Clemens and Mr. Marshall, though he's here in spirit, and this is U.S. History Flipped. Alright guys, so what we're going to be talking about today is the Progressive Era. And so the Progressive Era is really awesome. It's the time period that happens after the Industrial Revolution in the United States, where they're trying to clean up a lot of the messes that happen from industrialization. And I love this time period because I like it when you try to fix problems. So we're talking about 1900 to 1920. And our animation that's going to let us know if we're writing is the little happy, smiley, sunny face. All right. So let's talk about why they wanted to reform. And so this is a little bit of a review here, but definitely need to deal with some of these business practices that were happening. First off, you've got monopolies where one company is controlling everything, and so it's squeezing out other companies, and as a result, what's happening is the companies that are left, they can charge whatever they want because there's no competition, and who gets hurt? It's the consumer. It's the people like you and me that are buying things. The other thing that's going on is natural resources. This is the time where, coal and oil are king, and they're, just drilling and digging and doing all this stuff. They're polluting the water. They're polluting the air. It's really bad. And so definitely something that needed to be worked on. The people that are working in all these places are definitely not doing very well either. And so we've talked a bunch about this, that they're working really long hours for really low pay, that things are very unsafe. There's a lot of accidents that are happening. When people are trying to form unions, they're either being shut down or people are being fired, or when the unions are trying to have strikes, a lot of violence is happening, which we talked about before, things like Haymarket or the Great Railroad Strike. And then the people that are living in the cities and working in these factories, not only are they going to work in horrible places, but then when they're coming home, they're living in these tenements that are just terrible, very unsafe, disease-ridden. There's all kinds of crime. Things are just really not going well. So it's great that we have this time period where they're working on trying to fix things. And so this is just a neat little chart that kind of shows some of the goals of progressivism. So you'll see that there, a lot of the labor groups want to restrict immigration, talk about prohibition of alcohol, ending child labor, trying to get rid of monopolies, regulate private utilities, trying to get women the right to vote, trying to end corruption, political corruption with the different machines that are happening, hoping that immigrants will Americanize and become part of society. The idea of ending, sort of what was called white slavery, and giving workers more rights, and then overall political reform. Just trying to increase democracy. So what you guys are going to have is 5 multiple choice that you're going to answer throughout this. And so if you want, you could pause it right here and you can look at this question. The answer sheet is on the back. Hang on here. Sorry. The answer sheet is right on the back of your notes. All right, so muckrakers. Muckrakers are the people that are digging through all the junk in society to figure out what's going on and to expose the bad stuff to everyone else. So you can see I've got a mucky, kind of nasty, muddy background here. So these guys are journalists. Some of them are writers, some of them are photographers, some of them are artists, some of them are novelists. And so these guys are exposing the bad things, the muck that's happening in society, so that the government will be pressured to take some action and reform will happen. And so I like this political cartoon. This is just, an example of something that, could be muckraking. And so you've got cholera here, and you've got, you know, this disinfectant battery and the Board of Health, and just trying to make changes to make things better. All right, and then we have our next multiple choice question. Again, you could pause it here and put the answer on the back of your notes packet. All right, so now we're looking at individual muckrakers. Now, here's how I'm definitely going to really be able to tell that you're listening and paying attention and not just writing things down randomly. Please, 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 I left it out on your notes packet. Please write down the books that these guys wrote. So, because it's really important, because our good friend the Regents definitely references this. So our first guy is Jacob Riis, and he wrote a book called How the Other Half Lives. And so what he talked about was life in the tenements in New York City. And so he took a ton of photographs, really, really exposed what was going on so that people could see how everyone's living, you know, in their own city. And so as a result, you get a bunch of reforms, just overall raising awareness about poverty, and then public safety sorts of things like building codes, fire escapes, hoping that, you know, to prevent some sort of easy deaths. The next guy is Frank Norris. He wrote a book called The Octopus. And so his book was about railroad monopolies. And as a result of this, you know, what he exposed, the Interstate Commerce Commission that we talked about previously, that we said really wasn't working very well, definitely improved. They were able to get some more teeth and more enforcement going on here. And so here you can see one of Jacob Riis's pictures of some of the dilapidated buildings. Here, really famous picture of these little kids that are living in a stairwell. All right, so next, so we have Ida Tarbell, and she wrote a book called The History of Standard Oil. And so this is talking about the bad things that Standard Oil is doing as a monopoly, talking about the things that Rockefeller is doing. And so the reforms that we get with this is, again, we talked about previously the Sherman Antitrust Act, but it wasn't very effective early on. Now they're starting to enforce it. And so what we end up getting is a Supreme Court case that Mr. Marshall is actually going to talk about in part 2, Northern Securities versus the United States, where they actually start breaking up monopolies. Our next person is Lincoln Steffens, and he wrote a book called The Shame of the Cities. And so this is about corruption that was going on in the cities. And so as a result, helped to create things to try to end the corruption, to make it so that you know, these criminal activities aren't happening as much, like the civil service test, but also different things to improve democracy, like direct primary, recall referendum, and initiative. And again, we're mentioning them here, but Mr. Marshall is going to actually end up talking about them a little bit more in part 2. So even right now, if you're kind of like, huh, what is this? That's fine. Mr. Marshall's going to go over it. All right, and so we have a political cartoon. Now, even though this isn't the exact octopus that Frank Norris is talking about, this is talking about Standard Oil. The idea of, you know, an octopus was really big in this progressive era kind of muckraking thing, you know, with all the tentacles and all the different things that they're controlling and influencing. And I really like this cartoon. You definitely see it on the Regents a lot. This one is talking about political bosses. This is Boss Tweed, who's a little bit before this time, but again, is another guy that's, you know, controlling politics in New York City and very corrupt. Here's a later one. And again, you've got that justice is being, you know, flattened by his thumb. Our next person is probably the one people remember the most, is Upton Sinclair, and he wrote a book called The Jungle. And so this was talking about conditions in the meatpacking industry. And I swear to God, if you ever want to read something that's totally gross and might make you into a vegetarian, read this. Oh my gosh. So as a result, we get 2 major laws passed. We get the Meat Inspection Act, which said, okay, we need to actually inspect this. We need to make sure that the food isn't spoiled. We need to make sure that there isn't rat poison in it. We need to make sure that there's not parts of rats in it. And the Pure Food and Drug Act, basically saying that that companies can't make false claims about what their specific medicines will cure. You can't just say you're going to cure cancer or something when the main ingredient in your medicine is alcohol. All right, and so here's your number 3 question. And again, remember with these multiple choice, if you need to rewind and look back, you could definitely, the answers are pretty clear. So here's the cover of the jungle. And here's a picture inside the meat packing plant. And like I said, it was just totally disgusting. I mean, sawdust in the food, rat parts, rat feces, ugh, gross. If you want to pause and just, if you're that kind of person, you want to pause it and actually read this, it's pretty gross. So enjoy. All right, and we have another multiple choice question. Again, you can go back and look at your notes if you need help with that. Some general reforms that are going on. Remember, we were talking about poverty, living in those cities. And so, yeah, they're trying to make things better so that, you know, improve sanitation to help decrease disease. We talked about settlement houses. Remember, we talked about Jane Addams and the Hull House in Chicago. So that's a movement that was spreading around the country. Also, improvements for women's rights. Women got the right to vote in the 19th Amendment. Improving women's education. Women's colleges had been around, but now there was more of them, and there were more co-ed colleges. So women were allowed to go to college with men, which was really great. Now, here's something. The one thing that I really find depressing in the progressive era, because, you know, there's so many reforms that are being made and things that are trying to be helped. This is one where they weren't super successful in terms of improving rights for African Americans. So we're definitely talking about these 4 folks, and they were working and really, really hard and stuff. But in terms of being successful at that point in time, they really weren't. But they did set the stage for later with the civil rights movement. So you have Booker T. Washington, and the way I always remember the difference, because the Regents likes to ask you the difference between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. So in my head, I say the T stands for training, because he's very big on vocational training. What he said was, or what his belief was, that it was really going to be difficult for blacks and whites to be equal socially, but if they can be economically equal, or at least that blacks can have more economic opportunity by having training, that would improve things. Now, W.E.B. Du Bois, he's different. And so I always, in my head, I think of the E as equaling equality. That he said, no, you know what, blacks and whites should be completely equal socially, politically, economically. And so he helped create the NAACP. The NAACP stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And this is still around today. It's a very powerful organization. And so he created this organization, helped to create this organization, and definitely all about total equality. Now, Marcus Garvey is different from these guys. Marcus Garvey is definitely more radical. He said blacks and whites really cannot work together, that there should be just, he kind of was in favor of segregation, to the point that he even sponsored some Back to Africa kinds of movements. So definitely much more radical. And then Ida B. Wells Barnett, she spoke out against lynching. And now, we talked about lynching when we were doing Reconstruction. This is still a problem here in the early 1900s. And so she's trying to get laws passed to prevent it. The problem is she's not successful. They were unable to pass those laws. And so clockwise, here's Booker T. Washington. I actually should have mentioned, he went on to form the Tuskegee Institute, and we'll talk more about them when we get into World War II. Here's W.E.B. Du Bois. Here's Marcus Garvey, and here's Ida B. Wells Barnett. All right, and so then we have our last multiple choice question. And remember, you can always pause, rewind, go back, and look at that. All right, folks, so that finishes us up for part 1. Tune in for part 2 with Mr. Marshall.